Okay. So we think, we'll sing this little prayer which expresses two things. The first two lines express for those of us who are Buddhists already that we're our reliance upon the Buddha and his teachings, and the second two lines we're going to listen to these teachings so we can take some advice from it to help us develop our amazing potential so we can be a benefit to others all the way to perfection. Sangye charang soke chognam la jangcho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupha shog sangye charang soke chognam la jangcho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupha shog sangye charang soke chognam la jangcho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupha shog. So we all here this we've already all been here before, haven't we? Nobody's not been here? Oh, I've never been here, she says. She's a Sakya nun. She snuck over here. So a few of you haven't been here this week, right? The rest of you have. So it's more of the same. Oh, you haven't. Okay. Anyway, it's all more of the same. Like I say, I feel like a fraud sometimes because I keep talking about the same things. But there you go. It's Buddha's fault because he only talks about, the same old things. So this is what we call the Course, Marianne, is it? Change our minds, change our lives. Is that what we talked about? Oh, why did I call it this? What happened? Maybe I gave you the wrong information. Yeah, I did. I put my tripa down there. Look, my tripa it says, instead of saying Kurukulla. Oh my God. Okay, so tell me again what you called the course. Oh, I'm so sorry. I think I forgot to change the cover. I see the teachings I chose, and it is this, but I forgot to change the cover, so go on. There you go, okay, all right. Well, that's a good starting point, which is so actually, that's really, okay. Okay, so where does that concept fit into the big picture? Okay, where does that concept fit into this packaging of Buddha's teachings? I think I mentioned this in the week, but I'll say it here too. Often we don't realize, when we look at the Buddhist teachings, we don't realize it's like any body of knowledge that you learn. It begins at the middle, the easy stuff, it goes to the middle stuff, and you get to the most advanced stuff, and then you graduate. Any body of knowledge we know is like that, but we tend not to think that when it comes to spiritual teachings. We tend to give equal status to all the spiritual concepts. A bit of love, a bit of compassion, a bit of emptiness, a bit of karma, a bit of impermanence. We see it as one big glob of information. But what really is very powerful, when we learn this, it will make sense to it. Everything will make sense. It really is like this. If you were learning music or learning mathematics, and you picked up a course book randomly and opened a page, you'd get a sense, you'd know that there's grade 6, and this is grade 4, and that's grade 14. You'd kind of know what level it is, and you'd know where you're at and what you can handle, So it is literally true that all Buddhist teachings from A to Z are like that. So as we know in the certainly the Gelugpas, there's the framework is from Tsongkhapa's point of view. It's called the Lamrim, but actually and that's known as a gradual path. Well, as we know, if you study a gradual path of music, you don't call it a gradual path. You call it a course. If you study to become an architect, it's a course. We know this. So Lamrim is really, the meaning is a course. So all courses, as I said, are in early, middle, advanced. It's just how it is. Junior school, high school, university. As His Holiness said, it's like the education system. And this is literally true. And I mean literally true. But we don't think about it like this, So as we've been talking over the week, and I'll just give the summary here, and it's all here, the junior school level of practice, this is the essence of junior school level of practice, is Buddha's teachings on how to control our behavior. So why would we want to do this? Because he is saying we're all driven by crazy delusions. We're all driven by these neurotic states of mind that he says are completely misconceptions, are totally disturbing, and he has discovered from his own experience that they're not at the core of our being and we can get rid of them. Given this, okay, and that's the end result. Like I mentioned it during the week, and I'll say it here now, it's totally appropriate. The end result on the Mahayana path, on the Mahayana course to Buddhahood, on this course we will engage in. It might take a few lifetimes to complete this course, but nevertheless it's a course. The end result is Sangye, the Tibetan word for Buddha. And the etymology is very tasty. Sang implies the eradication from our mind of all neuroses, all ego, all delusions, all disturbing emotions, whatever words you want to call them. Ego grasping, attachment, anger, and all the other nonsense. This is Buddha's outrageous, radical finding, his own direct experience. He's not a creator. He didn't make it up. He's not speculating. This is his own direct experience. He is saying, here's my methodology. Here's how to accomplish it. And so he gives us his package of teachings, his methodology. So the end result is to get rid of the delusions, and then Gye is to develop all the goodness to perfection. This seems such a simple concept, but outrageous if we compare with the modern world's view of what the mind is capable of. It sounds demented as far as we're concerned. You know, there's no concept in modern psychology of getting rid of all delusions and growing all the goodness to perfection. And that's why we think it's religion. We stick it in the sky, you know. But this is his own experiential findings. And he says, this is my methodology, this is how I did it, over to you. That's the end result. So given his view that ego, fears, jealousy, depression, anxiety, psychosis, all the fancy word we make up in the West the last 100 years about mental illness, given that all of those are not at the core of our being, which is Buddha's point. They're not at the core of our being. They're not fundamental to who that we are. They're not integral to who we are. They're not in our essence. They're not at the core of our being. This is what it's implying. If he says he's got rid of them all, it implies that they're not at the core of our being. Otherwise, it's like cutting off your fingers. And you can't say, you know, your hands are fundamental to what your hand. The fingers are integral to your hand. You can't. What's the point of cutting your hands off? But he says we've got these extra bells and whistles called anger and fear and neurosis, which we think are normal, but he says are completely mental illnesses, and you don't need them, baby, and you can get rid of them. So if that's true, then he said, and this he's saying, they're the cause of all our suffering. They're the cause of why we harm others. So given that our job from here to Buddhahood is to rid the mind of all the rubbish and grow all the goodness, and this is the bottom line, fundamental, this is it, it's what implied, then we better start doing the job. So how do you do the job? Well, junior school, Grade 1, junior school, the essence of junior school practice is then to control the servants of these crazy delusions. And that's called our body and speech. We harm sentient beings, don't we, with our body and speech? No other part of us. There's only body and speech, that's it. And those actions are driven by the crazy bits in our mind. This is called the voices of ego. Well, Buddha says that you've got to control the mind. You've got to get rid of the stuff. But the behavior we have is so berserk that it's too much to ask us to start controlling the mind. So he says, control your body and speech first. This is junior school. That's the first level of practice. And the essence of that is all Buddha's vast teachings on the law of karma. Abide by the laws of karma. That's the essence of junior school. Abide by the laws of karma. That's the essence of junior school practice. Now, the next level, now you control your body and speech to some degree. You now go to high school, and now you control your mind. Now you can get to your mind. Now you're going to get some concentration, meditation, using this amazing technique. These amazing Indians before the Buddha invented these geniuses, these genius yogis and thinkers and philosophers. They created single-pointed concentration. They come up with it. An ingenious method, the likes of which do not exist in our modern world, that enable us to go to more subtle levels of our mind, completely subdue the grosser level, the crazy level of body and speech and mind, and to go to more subtle levels and eventually get rid of those neuroses. So here, the second level, you control your mind. This is the point. Now you're ready for the next level. That's high school. Now you go to university. And that's the compassion wing. That's the bodhisattva path. Now you've done the nuts and bolts of putting yourself together, understanding the laws of karma and understanding the mind, Buddha's extraordinary view of the mind, harnessing your body, speech and mind. This is the essence of the first scope. The second scope, the first and second scopes are junior school, high school. Now you're capable of seeing others and go, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. Look at this suffering, this is unbearable. So you continue to work on your mind, that never stops. But now it's in reference to others. The first lot is to protect you from harming other people, thus harming yourself. Here, it's now not only to not harm them, but it's to learn how to benefit them. And so you're perfecting this, you continue to perfect your mind. And you add bodhicitta to the mix, and you realize emptiness, and then you become a Buddha. So it's incremental. So if you opened up a book, any page, a Dharma book, and you read one sentence, you would know exactly, is that junior school, high school, university, or if it's Vajrayana, postgraduate. I'm not kidding here. And when you know this, you've got a real sense of how all the practices fit. But right now it's just this big glob, isn't it, of Buddhist teachings. Where does everything fit? What level am I at? What am I supposed to do? We haven't got a clue. But when you understand where it all fits, then you know what you can apply. So in one day you might say a mantra. That's postgraduate. That's Vajrayana. And another moment of the day you might be kind to somebody and practice generosity. That's university level. You might, another moment of the day, you might look at your mind, tell yourself to shut up and stop being so angry. That's called high school. Another time you might shut your mouth and not say those mean words. That's junior school. So when you know this, the essence of the first level is control your body and speech. The essence of the next level is control your mind and control the delusions. The essence of the next level is continue to work on your mind, that never changes, but now expand yourself to break down the barriers between self and others so you can benefit others. And then you culminate it all in the Vajrayana and speed off to enlightenment. That's the essence of the entire path, from beginning to end. And when you know the essence of these points, you just pick up a teaching, you'll know exactly where it fits. And then you have some kind of sense of clarity. You're not always panicking, you know. Attachment. Oh, that's high school. It's about the mind. So just my raving on, I can't see any decent words here. Compassion, that's university. Karma, that's junior school. Once you've got the essence of it, then once you see the expansive commentaries in all the books, then you know where they fit, you know. I can't stress how important this is. And it's just as if you were learning acupuncture or music or mathematics. But if you had no idea, when you heard a certain thing about algebra, you had no idea what level it is. If you see a certain level of acupuncture, you have no idea what level it is. Of course you're going to be confused. You've got to know these things. You've got to learn it. That's assuming you study it, if you choose to study it. You have to know where it all fits, you know. Then you've got some sense of shape and structure. And then you get a sense of what you're capable of. So maybe in one situation, you know the best you can do is shut your mouth. That's junior school. Be humble and recognize it. You don't have the wisdom to even help another person, so at least just shut your mouth. At least shut your mouth. Another situation mightn't be so severe. You're managing to see your mind, and you can give yourself a little talk and work on the jealousy or work on this something. Then another time you might have the wisdom to know how to help somebody. That's the compassion wing. But we're all over the place much of the time. So, okay, the topic isn't on the cover, that should have been, is implying the most advanced level of university. Not Vajrayana yet, but it's the most advanced level of the university level of practice, where not only are you attempting, you've already learned to control your body and speech, you've already learned to control your mind, you've got some focus, you understand Buddhist model of the mind, you recognize all the delusions, that's a junior school and high school, and you're abiding by the laws of karma, and understanding your mind, and now you're beginning to develop equanimity and love and compassion for others, but now you get to the level, that the highest level of the Bodhisattva teachings is where you are so capable, you can actually take the difficult times and turn them into the path. This is the most advanced. This is the most advanced. This is intense. And it's almost, you could argue, everything else up to there is just getting us ready to really start to practice. You know, as Lama Zopa says, we have to learn to like problems like we like ice cream. So it's fundamentally changing our mind and interpreting what we would normally term a problem, calling it good. So you can't do this. It is impossible to do this if you haven't done junior school and high school as well. It's not possible. It's just impossible. It's impossible. That's why you've got to, you know, as Pabonko Rinpoche says, this level of practice is, you've got to be a suitable vessel. You've got to be a suitable vessel. And that means a person who's done some controlling of their body and speech by abiding by the laws of karma, lots of purification, lots of concentration, lots of meditating on their mind, understanding their delusions, subduing their delusions, and beginning to develop equanimity and love and compassion and all the other qualities. That's a suitable vessel. So that's where you've got to know where you're at. You've got to know where you're at. So in an ordinary relationship, let's say, if you're pre-junior school and you haven't begun to practice yet, what kind of person you'd be if you've got a crummy boyfriend who's mean to you, is a victim, full of attachment, full of anger, full of resentment, full of no awareness whatsoever of your own mind, completely thinking he's there to make you all happy, and you're resentful and jealous and angry and talk about him behind his back, and then come back like a moth to a flame while he beats you up again. Because you don't even know you can change your mind, and you don't realize you could leave the relationship. That's typical life. No wonder you all kill each other. Complete unawareness, total ignorance, total misery, total living, drowning in samsara. So then you begin to practice, and you hear that Buddha says, you know what, Robina, you can start to change your mind. You don't have to change your boyfriend. Wow, that's a revelation to us. Even that beginning, at least now you can try to control your body and speech. And then in the relationship, if it's still crummy, you begin to realize you've got some choices. Instead of being like a victim who comes back like a moth to a flame, the very first level of practice, you begin to get some sense of your own self-respect, and you realise that you're sick of this suffering. What's the point of living in this utter misery? You know, you've asked him to stop cheating. He doesn't stop cheating. So what am I going to do about it? Well, the victim keeps going back for more and then keeps blaming him. But if you're beginning to work on your mind, this is junior school, you'd start to realise, well, guess what here? I could actually control my body and speech, but I could decide to leave. If I can't handle this, and if you're at that level of practice, you can't handle it, so the intelligent decision will be to leave the relationship. I mean, if that happened, there'd be 40% more women on this planet. I always quote the number that there are 40% of all women who get murdered on this planet. You know who murders them, don't you? The bloke in the same bed. Well, the person in the same bed, because it's so intense. So if we had any self-respect, we would leave the relationship before that happened. But the trouble is, in our culture, we consider leaving something like bad or something, so you've got to live in misery till you die. No, to have the self-respect and intelligence and some awareness of your own body, speech and mind, and a recognition that this boyfriend's cheating on you, and you realise you can't handle it. This is like the first level. Then you've got to leave. You must leave. But what if you get to the most advanced level? Maybe there's some learning in this, and you are so capable of practice, you're so aware of where you're at, you know there's some kind of karmic relationship between you and this person. He is a complete creep, he is a disaster, he is an alcoholic, he is cheating on you, but you decide, you know what, I can handle this, and I can get some learning from it. That's advanced, I promise. Most of us aren't capable of that. So but if we're forced to, like my friends in prison, they are forced to that level of practice because they don't have the luxury of leaving. So it's in their face. So this is powerful if we can do it, and it's when we can begin to do that level of practice, that's when we really make leaps forward in our practice. But that really takes courage. It demands some self-respect. It demands clear awareness of your own capability. It demands a recognition that you're not stuck in a relationship and you're not stuck in the way you think, that you can change your mind. This is profound, actually. And you don't need to wait for a problem to come. They rain down on our head every day because that's the way we are, you know. So we have a marvellous opportunity 1,000 times a day to do this extraordinary level of practice. So what's the logic of this level of practice? Of using, what's the word you used again? Joyfully doing what? Forget the joyful, okay? Joyful comes eventually. That's a bit optimistic. What's the joyful what? Oh, no joyful in there. Oh, there's joyful as well. Well, that's a big ask, okay? Okay, joy. That's really advanced. That's like St. Francis who was it? Who let the animals eat him or something? Who was it? Who was the one who loved the animals? No, was it one who even got bit in the lions, all that? Yeah, it was some other bloke. I don't know who he was. Never mind. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. So we've got to really treat this stuff with respect. You know, and our trouble is, I think, when we think of religious, think of spiritual practice, we think of, it's all about compassion, it's all about love and compassion. And we're very sentimental and kind of rosy-eyed when it comes to love and compassion, all kind of these gooey feelings. Well, you know, love and compassion in Buddhism are based on clear, powerful wisdom. Wisdom, which the first stages of practice, kind of give iron, strength, courage to our compassion, you know. Compassion is not some sentimental, gooey feeling. It's really powerful, and it's based on wisdom. And wisdom is what we get practicing junior school and high school. That's not that analogy, a bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. So, okay, what's the logic of this practice then? The logic is that what we call a problem is what attachment doesn't want. So to understand this, we absolutely have to understand high school. We have to understand the more advanced stages of the wisdom wing, which is the essence of Buddha's teachings about the mind. His amazing analysis of the mind and how it functions. So to understand that, we have to understand the mental consciousness. We have sensory consciousness and we have mental consciousness. As Lama Yeshe says, we make the body the boss. So when we think of experiences, we think of our bodies, sensory experiences. We give enormous power to the way our senses experience things, because we're totally addicted to our bodies, you know. As far as we're concerned, we only have the body. But we did in the week time, and I'll do during the week, and we'll do this now. It's really quite powerful to really understand the mind, to understand what is in the mind. In order to be able to understand what adversity is, or what happiness is, or suffering, we have to understand the mind. Buddha's analysis of the mind. So we have, in general, we have mind, or consciousness, and we have sensory consciousness, and we have mental consciousness. Well, the mental consciousness, Lama Zopa says, they point here, the Tibetans. That's where the workshop is. That's where all the happiness and all the feelings and love and compassion and emotions and anger and low self-esteem and depression and neurosis and anxiety and all the rest. This is in the mental consciousness. Love and compassion, intelligence, all of it is the component of the mental consciousness. The sensory consciousness are like dumb animals. They are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition, but we give this massive power to them, you know. Like I said during the week, you know, oh, what a pretty thermos, we'll say. What a pretty thermos. Well, we logically deduce that our eyes are seeing a pretty thermos. Well, not possible. For the Buddha, and the very elaborate descriptions of the sensory consciousness's function, the eye consciousness can only cognize two things here, shape and color. So the rest of it is cognized by the mind. A pretty cup is an opinion held in the mental consciousness about that shape and color. But it all happens so quickly, we don't see. So what happens is, and I say this, it's like a joke, but it's seriously true, as my eyes go here, and it cognizes this shape and color, in a millisecond, almost like not a second in between, our mental consciousness is accessed, like quicker than Google, and I mean it really sincerely. The whole processing process, the way they describe it in Buddhist psychology, is incredibly sophisticated, utterly fascinating. It would fascinate modern scientists if they bothered to even posit the possibility that what they're going to investigate is not the brain. It's called the mind, it's called consciousness. And it's highly sophisticated in the way it functions, in the way it processes information. And these amazing yogis before the Buddha even unpacked and unraveled this process. All the understanding of the mind in Buddhism, based on the Indians before, is this highly sophisticated explanation of the way conceptual mind functions. It's utterly fascinating, I tell you. So this, quicker than Google then, the mental consciousness is accessed, and up comes the thought, the opinion, the viewpoint, the assessment. What a pretty thermos. So the Buddha is saying the level we function at day to day in our mental consciousness is at the level of conceptual. This includes mathematics, theories, and emotions, surprisingly to us. It includes what we call emotions, the anger, the love, the generosity, the kindness, the rage, the depression. These are simply all the emotions where our body is very visibly involved, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's just the indicator of what's going on deep down in the mental consciousness itself, which is at conceptual level. They're all conceptual stories. This is literally the way Buddhism describes. So when we begin to comprehend this, and this is high school, then we can begin to understand how this mind works and be able to assess what the hell is going on in there. This is when you really become a Buddhist. Be your own therapist, as Lama Yeshe says. He's not kidding. It's a really sophisticated comprehension of the workings of these crazy thoughts, which are 1,000 a second we have. There's this massive emotional stuff in there, which we have to unpack and unravel, make sense of. And all the tools are there for us. So, in the mental consciousness, we have 3 categories of states of mind among these thousands of thoughts. There's no 4th category. There are those that are delusional, ego-based, neurotic, disturbing, delusional, distorted, misconceptions, maniac states of mind that are the source of all suffering and the source of why I harm others, which we can get rid of. This is Buddha's deal. So there's millions of these, but we can get them down to the 3 poisons, as Buddha calls. The root delusion, as they call, ego grasping, ignorance. This maripa, this primordial, fundamental ignorance about how things exist. Not just ordinary ignorance, very specific ignorance. The root delusion, the root one. Such that when we've uprooted it, in other words, realized emptiness, quote unquote, we are beginning the end of our samsara. That's the root. Ego grasping, it's known colloquially. Its nature, it's so subtle that we don't even give it a name in our culture. We assume, well, it assumes a fantasy, separate, bereft, concrete I. We assume the reality of that in our culture. Buddha says it's a complete fantasy we made up, On the basis of this primordial misconception of the I, we have the main delusion day to day, which is this frantic, vampire-like, hungry junkie in here called attachment, to get what that supposed I wants every millisecond. On the basis of attachment not getting what it wants, and it's 1,000 times a day, then the 3rd of these 3 poisons will manifest, and that's called anger. So simple. But there's a whole spectrum of anger. There's violent anger, irritation, annoyance, frustration, upset, or mild versions of this, to internalized guilt, despair, and depression. These are all responses when attachment doesn't get what it wants, which is 1,000 times a day. And attachment is virtually running the show. This is not how we talk in the West. This is not how Jung talks. This is not how Freud talks. This is how Buddha talks. That's our job in this room, okay? You can go somewhere else for Freud. I wouldn't have a clue about Freud anyway. But he doesn't talk like this, I'm telling you. So we have to recognize these states of mind, because these are the source of our pain and suffering. But we hear them, we just get guilty. Oh, I'm a bad person. No, load of rubbish. You're not a bad person. You've got to learn to recognize these crazy states of mind that are there all the time, underpinning all of our neurotic emotions, and then also polluting this 2nd category of our states of mind called the virtuous ones, the valid ones, the reasonable ones, the appropriate ones, the beneficial ones, called love and kindness and compassion and intelligence and joy and blah, blah, blah. You could say. You've all got those. They're the source of our happiness. And they're dragged down by the other rubbish. They're polluted by the other rubbish. So we've got to learn this job of distinguishing between these different states of mind. And this really, these words are simple, but I've got to stress it. This is not the way we talk. It's not the way we frame the mind in our modern culture. We give equal status to anger and love and neurosis and kindness and jealousy and compassion, etc. We think they're all normal parts of an ordinary person. So we don't ever have an idea that I've got to identify them and distinguish them from each other so I can lessen one and grow the other. That's not the way we talk. So Buddha's view is so different. We just don't really hear it properly unless we study it quite deeply, So then these 3, there's a hierarchy of them. Ego grasping gives rise to attachment, gives rise to anger. And these are the main ones. And then on the basis of this, the other rubbish, the other dramas. Jealousy and all the other nonsense, arrogance and so on and so forth, Low self-esteem, all the rest. There's so many variations of these. So these are the unhappy states of mind. These are the voices of ego. These are the neuroses. These are the ones that are painful. The very having of them is painful. And they are the ones that then cause us to do dumb things with our body and speech, which harm others and therefore harm ourselves. So, okay, Buddha says that all sentient beings want to be happy and all sentient beings don't want to suffer. I can say, that's pretty universal. Look at the dogs, monkeys, ants, you can deduce by their behavior. They only want the nice things. So happiness in general, we all know, means when the nice things happen. And suffering, we all know, is when the horrible things happen. In general, everybody would agree with that. But this is only the first level of suffering, you know, for the Buddha. And his Four Noble Truths, which you learn about really in high school. You know, the first one is there is suffering. The second is there are causes. The third is you can get rid of it. And the fourth is how to do it. Pretty straightforward. So the trouble is, though, the first one is called the suffering of suffering, and that's the one we all agree is suffering. The only one we think of as suffering. There's two subtler levels of suffering, and these are crucial to understand when we understand Buddhism. So the main problem of the first kind of suffering, this is coming from anger. The really heavy, freaked out, panic-stricken, thwarted attachment. How dare you do that to me? It is not fair. I do not deserve it, blah, blah, blah. And then what comes from that with body and speech? Just look at the world. Look at the animals. Look at humans. We can recognize immediately. It's a serious kind of terrible, heartbreaking problem. It's obvious. But in our culture, we call them so many fancy words. You know, we've got so many complicated words for it. So the gross level of suffering is a result of this. You can see it. You get harmed by others, people cheat on you, lie to you, steal from you, you steal, lie, cheat on others. It's because of anger, but so much of anger, you know. Then the more subtle level of suffering is because of attachment, which is the root of the anger. And we don't even almost think that's a problem, but it's a much more subtle level of suffering. Buddha calls the second kind of suffering, which is related to attachment, is the suffering of change. It's what we call actually happiness. So in ordinary terms, what we call suffering is when the bad things happen, which is Buddha's view of the first kind of suffering. But what he calls the second kind of suffering is what we call happiness, which is, so the first one, okay, if attachment effectively is the main problem in day-to-day life, ego grasping is the root problem for Buddha. But effectively attachment to get what that supposed I wants is the one that runs the show every millisecond for all sentient beings. That's attachment. So what we call suffering is when attachment doesn't get what it wants. The red light, the mean husband, the pain in the belly, the cancer, the house burning down, whatever it might be, to whatever degree of suffering, that's what we all agree is suffering. And it sounds kind of brutal, but the Buddha says we only suffer because we have delusions. If we're liberated from suffering, we don't have delusions, so we will not suffer. This is a very bizarre concept in our world. We don't believe this is possible, but that's Buddha's point. When you've uprooted delusions from your mind, you can't possibly suffer. It's impossible. Suffering is caused by delusions. If the delusions are gone, suffering's ended. It's logic. It's logic. We're not used to hearing it, though. It's too weird. So suffering, by definition, the gross level, is when my attachment doesn't get what it wants. So aversion arises, panic or fear or whatever, isn't it? That we all get. So even just understanding this level of suffering, then we can begin to understand how you can change it, how you can transform it. And that's the most advanced level. Once we can identify this first level of suffering, which is when the bad things happen, the headache, the red light, the husband leaving you, or even just the husband not putting the toilet seat down. I hear men don't put toilet seats down. I don't live with men, so I wouldn't know. Is that true? I hear that men don't put the toilet seat down. Look, all nodding. This is true. I know, but feng shui-wise, it's best to have the lid, both lids down. Otherwise, all your money energy gets sucked up and thrown out the door. You better keep your door locked, your bathroom locked, and all the seats down. It's apparently called the feng shui. Hello. So, okay, if we can understand in high school the first kind of suffering, which is when the bad things happen, but this is the point now. When we understand that everything in the mental consciousness, like we said before, is a conceptual story, an opinion. What a pretty thermos is an opinion. It's a conceptual story. Buddha says we live at the level of conceptuality. In the day-to-day life, all to the depth of our emotions, they're all underpinned by being conceptual stories. This is Buddha's unique approach to the mind, and it takes time to hear it, because it's not how we think. When we realize that all these states of mind that we have are conceptual stories that we get born programmed with from having had before, and then all the more seriously buy into again. We keep practicing, reinforcing all these conceptual stories. So the three conceptual stories we're talking here are ego grasping, the root delusion that believes in the inherent me, which gives rise to attachment to get what the inherent me wants, and then aversion and panic attack when it doesn't get it. They're all conceptual stories, and they're rooted in our being, and ancient habits. We can even begin to understand conceptually that they're conceptual stories. Then we can begin to understand what suffering is. So it's an opinion that arises the moment I don't get I get the red light instead of the green light. When we understand this analysis, I'll understand that that's because my attachment, this frantic, bottomless pit of emotional hunger, every single second, it frantically wants what I want every second. It's completely natural. It's more serious in some than others, but it's their default all the time, underneath everything. There's an assumption every second of the day that I must get what I want all the time. That's called happy feelings. That's called meeting the objects that I decide are the ones such that when I have contact with them will trigger a happy feeling. That's called chocolate cake, not carrot cake. That's called the green light and not the red light. That's called Fred and not Joe, etc. We've got all these memories, all these thoughts programmed in our mind, all neatly filed in terms of what I want and what I don't want, what I like and what I don't like, in terms of objects of attachment and objects of aversion, and they're programmed in there, and they're very deeply ingrained in there. So I'll constantly be assessing my life in terms of whether they are fitting with my opinions. This is what we are. This is what samsara is. So we understand that suffering is when my attachment is thwarted. My viewpoint, my view, is not getting what it wants. My view is not being met. My view is not, what happens is not in sync with my view. Then that's what is called suffering. But we never think of it as related to my mind. We just think it is suffering and it's not my fault and how dare it happen to me. And it's all his fault. We don't think it has anything to do with our mental stories in the head. We have no concept that what goes on, as Lama Zopa says, we have no awareness of what goes on in our mind, all these opinions flying out every second, have any role at all in our lives. This is how demented we are. This is how demented we are. But we realize all this a little bit in getting in high school. Then we get to the compassion wing and start to really grow and grow and grow. Then we can really begin to be ready to take this idea to interpret adversity as good. So why would we want to do this? It's so simple. It's so logical. It's not torture. It feels like kind of being masochistic, Because what we're trying to do across the board, all the way from here to Buddhahood, is get rid of delusions. They're the problem. And the one we're trying to get rid of is attachment. Forget ego grasping. Attachment even, which is this frantic, needy, bottomless pit of emotional hunger that is there all the time, every second. That is this assumption, like I said, it's an assumption basically, that I must get what I want every second. That's what we mean by happiness. That's what we mean by happiness. And it's quite technical. We learn this in the Four Noble Truths. It's quite technical. We are, in the third category of states of mind, I like to call them the mechanics of the mind. There's like concentration, good memory. There's many of these. And whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need these. So it's in that sense, they're neither called virtuous nor non-virtuous. But they're mechanics, and we all have to have them to function properly. As Lama Zopa says, thieves need mindfulness. It just means not forgetting what you're doing moment by moment. It's not holy, but it's necessary. So, one of them in here, oddly enough, is called feeling. And this is crucial to understand. In Buddhist psychology, what feeling means is there's only 3 kinds of feeling we ever have in a day. It's not the way we think of as emotions. You either have a pleasant feeling, and there's a spectrum of those, we know that, unpleasant feeling, and there's a spectrum of those, and then indifferent and neutral. Well, forget the neutral, the boring old neutral, forget them. All we care about is the pleasant ones. That's another word for happiness. Happiness is not referring, when we think of happiness, we think of the cake that caused it, the person that caused it, the weather that caused it. That's the external object. Happiness is a state of mind. It includes these sensory experiences as well. Suffering is a state of mind. So feeling, a pleasant feeling is another word for happiness. An unpleasant feeling is another word for suffering. So we all know logically, instinctively, we don't want the unpleasant feelings and we want the pleasant feelings. So then attachment's job is like this monster, this kind of freak, control freak. Attachment's a control freak whose job every second is to locate and find the external object, boy, handbag, cake, weather, sound, you name it, to locate the object such that due to my habit, I have contact with it through my senses, thus triggering a pleasant feeling. So attachment wants the cake, but what attachment really wants is the pleasant feeling. The cake is just this boring thing you got to get in the hole to trigger a pleasant feeling, we think. But within the second piece is already triggering unpleasant feelings, but we don't want to think about that. Isn't it? So it's quite technical. So pleasant feeling is the bottom line. We're desperate for pleasant feelings. You've got to move so I can see you, yeah. And we're desperate for pleasant feelings, and we cannot stand unpleasant feelings. So we spend attachment spends the rest of its life avoiding the object such that when we have contact with them, an unpleasant feeling is triggered. All of these parts of our mind, it's all very intricate. They do their job, you know. Each has their function. It's very precise. And these amazing genius Buddhists do all the analysis of this really clearly. And we're not discussing the brain here. We're discussing the mind. Conceptual mind. It's highly sophisticated. So basically all this is a bunch of practice, you know. It's a bunch of practice. That's why, you know, just recently I went up to the mountains, up to Laudo, Lama Zopa's cave. When I told him last year we were going, 32 of us to raise money for the place and walk up there for 4 days up the trek, you know, trek up the mountains, the Himalayas. He said, he beamed at me. It was his meditation cave from past life as well as his early youth. And he said, oh, you won't want to come back. Well, believe me, I really did want to come back. I promise you. And I kept looking as I'm walking up these mountains. And I look at the pictures, they look really amazing. The snow, it's 4,000 meters, amazing Himalayas. And I'm looking all through the trek, or I'm feeling the desperation of my poor lungs, my poor muscles dying, because I never walk. If I do walk, it's on the flat. I walk the length of Manhattan very happily. But up a mountain, never in my life. And I'm not being sarcastic here. It was like living hell for me. People kept saying, look at the beautiful mountains. All I could see was my feet. Because if I didn't watch my feet, I'd topple over the side. So I couldn't see any pleasure in it. I don't think I had a decent, pleasant feeling the entire 15 days. Are we communicating here? So I'm trying to prove also is how it's so arbitrary. Not arbitrary, it's according to habit. But somebody else, my friend Kate, she's in bliss. I could say forever, she said, I'm trying to be polite, you know. What do you mean forever? Are you kind of getting my point? Because we all have certain taste. Due to karma, we have certain habits. So certain things trigger pleasant feelings in me, but unpleasant in someone else. We know this. But this is already giving us the key to success, that it proves emptiness. So in the transforming problems practice, not only do you learn to practice liking a problem like you like ice cream, you also realize it's possible to do so because it doesn't have an inherent nature as good or bad. And so this is why this is an advanced practice. It's based on emptiness. It's powerful. It's logical. So we're practicing seeing things in a new way, you know. So if I were really practicing, trying to practice walking up the mountains, I could appreciate the benefit of what we were doing, because we're going to walk up there, go to this place, do a retreat in these holy places where the meditators, live, and try and get some vibes from it, and then create some virtue and raise some money. So I knew theoretically it was good, so I got some theoretical happy thoughts from it, not happy feelings, happy thoughts. But you understand my point? But at least you know that, then you can change your mind a bit. That's transforming problems. I tried to do it a bit. But if you're so in ordinary samsara, which is ordinary view, which has mean everything has got an absolute concrete reality, and if you don't like mountains, then there's never for 1 second the possibility that you could ever see mountains as good. You just think you're twisted if you thought that. It's like being, just demented. But that's the point. Then you realise you can change your mind, because anyway, nothing is set in stone. This is what transforming problems is. And the reason you want to transform problems isn't just to suffer, it's because you want to get rid of delusions. So Atisha, this amazing, whatever he was, 11th century or something, saint, scholar, yogi who lived in India, in Tibet for the last years of his life. He had this mean, ugly, rude cook. Why do you keep this guy around? They asked him. How else would I know if I had anger? He said. So then that follows, if you're really practicing transforming problems, like the great bodhisattvas, and they come back onto this planet to help others, they would rather live with some person they hated, who didn't turn them on at all, but that you'd never know. They would show incredible love and devotion to this person than to live a person they liked. They would rather have a problem than have happiness. No, they'd rather have a problem. They'd rather bad things happen than good things happen, because they know the job. They're trying to rip out the delusions. So if you're trying to be a really good cyclist, I always think of Lance Armstrong, because he was I remember reading in the New Yorker an article about him before he became naughty, or before he was exposed as naughty. He had this this unbelievable energy. He loved the high mountains. The more high, the more hard, the more intense, the more struggle, the more happy he was, because that's the challenge. A problem is a challenge. If you just want a nice Sunday ride on your bike, you'd be dying of exhaustion going up the mountains, wouldn't you? You'd rather go down the mountains. Well, samsara is we just like to go down the mountains and relax and be in our comfort zone. So getting out of your comfort zone is the quickest way to rip out the delusions. Every time someone is mean to you, that helps you see your anger. That means you work on it. That means you've weakened anger. Then when you realize your anger, you've weakened your attachment. So then you would, of course, delight in having problems. Of course you would, because you know your job is to get rid of delusions. But if you just allowing your delusions to run the show, maybe not growing them, but just allowing them to get what they want every second, there's no practice. That's like going to the gym and doing your push-ups until it hurts, and then you stop. And you say, oh, I did my push-ups. Well, you know what? You didn't. You won't get any result from push-ups until you go further, until you go beyond your comfort zone and start to sweat and the muscles hurt. That's what practice is. So we like to just float on our, rest on our laurels. As long as we get nice weather and nice food, we can do a bit of meditation in the morning and say we're being a good practitioner, but nothing changes. So it really is like transforming problems, almost as if you only really begin to practice then. Until then we're playing safe. That's my feeling. You understand my point? So it's really intense. But you won't understand this logic of why you want problems until you understand high school. To understand Buddha's model of the mind, the delusions and how they function, and the goal of it, to get rid of the delusions. So it's obvious. The quickest way to know what muscles you've got to work on is to keep doing your push-ups until it hurts. It's kind of clear, it's logical. But everything in our being, attachment is such a junkie, attachment is so frantic to be comfortable, to get nice feelings, that it's very terrifying. I mean, has anybody done a nyungne? You know those retreats? Have you done, these nyungne is like just a 3-day retreat, 2.5 days really, isn't it? It's a very intense practice, 4 sessions a day, you do all this meditation and blah, 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 and then you do lots of prostrations. So prostrations is unbelievably intense hard work, It's just, you put your body all around the ground, you get up again many times, repeatedly. It's exhausting. But then the killer is, on the first day you just eat one meal, but the second day, the killer, the one that breaks the back of attachment, is you don't speak, you don't drink, and you don't eat. And even the strict ones, they don't even drink their spit. You've heard that? And with the first lot, you often do them in terms of 8 lots of 15 16 days. I'll never forget when I did my first 8 ever. It sounds silly, but you get my point. The person who led it made us be really strict, and you do 4 sessions a day and they're exhausting. And all you want to do between sessions is like die. Lie down and die. She wouldn't let us lie down. So that for me was the final killer. It was like hell. I mean, I'm not being sarcastic. I don't care if I have no food, no spit, no drink. If I can go to sleep and disappear, I'm happy. But we weren't even allowed to do that. That's the thing that broke the back of my attachment. You know, you think you're going mad. There is nothing to turn to, because all we do is turn to the senses. When things go wrong, food, sleep, comfort, the 5 senses. We're complete. The way Buddha understands attachment, if we say junkie, we mean the person on the outer edge of attachment, and they're the ones who've got a problem. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, Buddha says anybody with attachment, and that means nice people like us, we are junkies. But it's just a question of degree, because attachment equals junkie mind. Attachment is addiction. But because it's so normal in our culture, and because we live in a world, unlike those Sherpas up there, I mean, just thinking of the life they led, it was like being sent to prison. Living in the 10 degrees below. Like here in Boston, but you have a warm room, you know. The food, she has Annie Sampson for 70 years, Lama Zopa's sister, walking down the mountain like 500 metres up above, you know, down to just to grow the potatoes, to pick them, to eat dinner that night. 70 years, her knees are destroyed. She lives in this freezing cold place in this ugly thing with a few rocks. But she's blissful, because her attachment, she's used to not getting all the comforts that we talk about. So we're all junkies, basically. This is not meant to be sarcastic. Lama Zopa said, we have got renunciation, and renunciation is the essential first level of realization at high school and junior school. Meaning you're renouncing suffering, which means you have to know what it is, and its causes, which means you have to know what they are. Karma and delusions, in particular attachment. So he says, you've got renunciation when just the thought of another moment of attachment, just the thought of another moment of attachment is so repulsive, it's like being in a septic tank. So you can only assume that a person who says that is because they realize that. But it seems like a joke, just like a complete laughing joke, you know. But that's the depth of attachment in all of us. But we consider it normal. We consider we're nice people with normal behaviour, don't have much money, don't have much sex, don't have much food, they're really well behaved, we don't harm too many people. But this level of attachment is so primordial. And in our culture considered completely normal, not in any way disgusting. So it shows how far we have to go. So it's kind of humbling. It shouldn't be depressing, it's just humbling, you know. The level to which Buddha says we can unpack and unravel this mind of ours, to understand the depth of the suffering of this cute word attachment, which we consider not just normal, but good. So it's kind of, you know, makes you think. So we understand attachment and how it causes suffering. We'll understand how we can transform the experiences of when it doesn't get what it wants, which is panic attack, basically. The unkind words, the wrong food, the difficult situations, the cancer, the pain. I mean, I think of pain. I mean, when I'm walking up that mountain, it's painful, but I know when I stop walking, the pain will stop. And I just have to think that so many people on this planet live in pain. I almost can't bear to think about it. It's too painful. It's too much to think. This is pain of the body, you know, which is attachment, not getting what it wants. And it's not being cruel and mean. It's just the way we are constructed within samsara, according to Buddha's analysis of samsara, you know. The way this body of the 5 senses functions. So this is why the second level of suffering is understanding attachment. The first level is kind of reasonable when the bad things happen. But the second one is even more subtle, which is Rinpoche is implying, is the suffering of attachment, which is the kind of a honey-covered razor blade level of suffering, you know. We call it happiness. The Buddha says it's a subtler, more subtle, more primordial level of suffering. And there's an even subtler level as well. So way to go, you know. So we understand this roughly, this analysis in junior school and high school, then we can begin to understand the more advanced level of how to use it and transform it. Forget the joyful, that'll come eventually. At least theoretical understanding, this benefit to this, you know. Just like we have when we go to the gym. You come home exhausted, but you're happy because we know the benefit. We know, I mean, if you have that pain just sitting there watching television, you're in serious trouble. So we know the pain is an indicator of something happening. So we know it's good. That's the attitude we have to try and cultivate here. But again, you're not a suitable vessel until you've learned to control your body and your speech in junior school and know why you should, until you've controlled your mind in high school and have an intimate assessment, know how to assess your mind and exactly identify the neuroses. This is such heavy, sophisticated work. Then you're qualified to begin to understand how you can transform those experiences, because they're just programmed in our mind. We're just used to calling chocolate cake good and carrot cake bad. It's just habit. But we don't think that. We think it's set in stone. We think that chocolate cake is inherently good and the goodness and the happiness comes from the cake. Whereas Buddha says, no, baby, it comes from your story about that cake on that plate. That's the thing he's saying. Everything comes from the mind. The depth and the intensity of the stories we come into this life programmed with. What is good, what is bad, what we're attracted to, what we're not attracted to. That's just from habit, you know. That's just from habit. The more we've done something, the more habitual it is, the more excited it gets us, and the more it looks good to us. That's why the story I used during the week about a person who's, for example, this boy, he's called a fisherman. Little boy, the mother said, since little boy he first met fishing, it's like he fell in love with fishing. Because he came programmed into this life with a habit to kill from the past, such that when he saw it, it instantaneously triggered like a memory of it. It seemed so familiar to him. That's karma. And second, it triggered a very pleasant feeling in his body and mind. And then the third, all this is happening spontaneously, attachment arises and then paints a very delicious picture of it. Because when you're feeling very happy, things look delicious. So then this scenario then he called fishing, because he got a good feeling, because attachment made it look delicious, the logic is, oh, fishing must be good. It makes me feel good. I'll do it again. That's why we keep harming each other in this planet. That's why we keep suffering, because it triggers good. The irony is it triggers the habit to do something, triggers a good feeling. That's why the pedophile. Okay, we don't like to think these things. We just think they're evil. Send them to hell, you know. Due to familiarity with sexual activity with certain types of people. In this life, you're attracted to it again. And then because it triggers good feelings, you just assume it's good. We don't question this. We don't have any analysis of why this is happening. That's why Buddha's analysis of all this kind of technical is very fascinating. And this you learn in junior school. Then we begin to unpack and unravel this procedure and not get caught up in it as we get more advanced. It's just called feeling. It's just your interpretation. It's just a concept. You can change it. It's hard work. It's the hardest work we'll ever do because we're junkies for the good feelings. Are we communicating here? Any questions? Okay, go. Yes.
Oh, for the microphone.
Yeah, go.
When you were talking about how the last 100 years of
Is it
psychology,
a bit louder? Can't quite hear.
how the last 100 years of psychology, etc., does not seem to understand the nature of illusion, basically.
The what?
The nature of illusion and the nature of suffering.
I'm talking about the nature of illusion. What's that mean? I didn't say those words, so what do you mean by it? But just tell me what you mean by it. Just to be clear, so we're communicating.
Okay, let me start from the beginning then. I was wondering if the main reason that the current society does not understand Buddhist solution, Buddhist analysis and solution to our problems, is that it, as you said, it might take more than one lifetime, and they simply do not. If it would happen in one lifetime,
Yes.
it would be fairly clear.
Yeah.
And they would subscribe to the concept.
Well, maybe, I'm not sure. So we maybe forget
Potentially.
that one. But it's more than that, I think. What's the essence of your question? Say it.
Well, the theory of multiple lifetimes of a soul
I understand, yeah.
is
You think that's a stumbling block?
a stumbling
But
block.
I think it is definitely the truth. That's true. But I think maybe that's incidental in this case. I'm not sure, but I'll just tell you my feeling. In what we're discussing here, which is the Buddhist psychological analysis of the workings of these different parts of our mind and how they all work hand in hand to keep us conned into believing that it all happens from out. The general view that's our biggest problem, the Buddha would say, is because we're so believing, and this is what's reinforced by the modern scientific world, we so believe that happiness and suffering come from out there, that happiness is a function of the cake, that suffering is the function of the mean brother or something, you understand? And it all happens so quickly, what we don't realize is an analysis going on that calls it that. We just think it is that because it all happens so quickly. And so this is the worst of attachment and aversion. The worst functions of attachment and anger is to respond to the delicious thing, believing the cake is the cause of my happiness, and to respond to the wrong cake and thinking it's the cause of my suffering. And it appears to be this way, and so we reinforce it. That's the stumbling block. So in other words, we don't think our mind plays any role at all. I think I'm an innocent victim of a delicious cake and an innocent victim of an ugly cake. That's the real issue, I think. And so, of course, it's reinforced when, like, if you're my therapist and I've got a lousy boyfriend, I'm going to tell you how I'm angry and jealous and resentful, and it's not fair, and he cheats on me, he does this and he does that. You won't question, you won't say to me, well, Robina, just because he cheats on you is no reason to be unhappy. I mean, I'd sue you if you said that, because that's the logic, isn't it? So then what you're going to do is going to look back into the past and look for like needles in a haystack that are the cause of why I get angry. What happened to me way back then that caused me to get angry, that caused me to choose crummy boyfriends? Because we naturally assume all the causes are out there. 100%. And in fact, and I'm an innocent victim of this whole process. I didn't ask to get born. My mother and father made me. They plonked me on this earth. They gave me anger and love and compassion and negativity or whatever. It's all their fault. That's the view of samsara. And that's the main stumbling block, I think. Huh?
But then the solution is does have to do with karma and with multiple lifetimes.
Yeah, no, but I think that's not the, it's true, but that's not the issue here. The issue is the analysis of what is suffering and what causes it. The fact that it'll take a long time to get it is another discussion, I'd say. And this analysis can be done by anybody who just wants to think about, and not, if we really analyze it carefully, we can start to see it maybe does play a role. And we can prove things like, if I really believe that chocolate cake is the cause of my happiness and yet you vomit when you eat it, surely that should make me realize, well, my goodness, chocolate cake can't be the real cause of happiness, because if it did, it'd make you happy too. But we don't question it. We don't question it. We just, oh, that's just potluck, you just vomit. So we don't analyze. So I think we use logic. We could analyze these points. That's the real issue for me, I think, not the fact that it takes more than one lifetime. That's another discussion. Of course it is, but the issue here is the way the mind works, the mechanics of it, how all these bits, the analysis of why a pleasant feeling is triggered in me when I eat chocolate cake. We don't have that kind of analysis, I don't think. Maybe we do in modern psychology. I mean, there must be something in all these brilliant neuroscientists. You see my point? Huh? You don't agree still? Which bit don't you agree with? Which bit don't you agree with? Huh?
In a way, you said that Buddha's solution, Buddhist prescription, analysis and prescription is one complete deal. It's the four things. Right?
Change your mind. No, all we do is realize it's coming from the mind and change the mind. That's the answer. That's the Buddhist solution. It's as simple as that. Realize that my interpretation of chocolate cake is the mistake. That's all I'm saying. It's very simple. Whether it takes a lifetime or a day is not the issue here. That's the Buddhist solution. Change your mind. That's it.
But there's a jump from that to...
What, there's what?
There's a jump from that to suffering. What we consider suffering might be ice cream.
What? No. But Lama Zopa says you're to learn to like problems like you like ice cream. So you need to change your mind about things. You see my point? A problem in Buddhist analysis, a problem is when my attachment doesn't get what it wants. So when I'm trying to understand how I can use that experience, then when I realize it's my interpretation of chocolate cake that makes me believe it's good, and then when I don't get it, I get angry. If I change that analysis, I'm changing my mind. So then I will enjoy getting the bad thing, and I'll learn to really be happy about it, because now I can see I can change my mind. That's it. I think you're making it more complicated. Maybe. Anyway, we'll see what happens. Who else? Questions? No questions? No questions? You sure? Okay. 8:20. Okay, 8:15. You have a question? Good.
Okay.
Come on.
Well, I'm mostly in junior school, so...
Oh, sweetie, it's all right. We all are.
So I'm thinking this has really now gotten down a little bit more tonight. And so I started just jotting down some of my conceptual stories. And I guess I could do that forever. Write out my conceptual stories as a way of having them in front of me.
Yeah.
I guess I'm asking, there's one thing... what's the best practice to be really in touch with your conceptual stories?
Well, here we're using Buddhist model of those conceptual stories, and they're very specific. The deepest one is ego grasping that has made up the fantasy of an inherent me, on the basis of which we've made up the fantasy called attachment, which exaggerates all the things that I think are delicious. That's the conceptual story we're talking about. And then aversion, which exaggerates the ugliness of certain things. So you can have an endless, you could write novels of conceptual stories, but here it's quite specific. The conceptual stories Buddha's talking about are these neuroses, these neurotic states of mind. Attachment, anger, pride, jealousy, anxiety is really specific. They're the conceptual stories he's talking about that are misconceptions. So as to identify how attachment is a liar. That's the point. Okay. That's the point. So they're very specific. I mean, this is the term I'm using, speaking loosely.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what, because the particular conceptual stories say that I've been born with in this life.
Like, give an example.
This belief that I have to be in a relationship to be happy.
Oh, all of those, no. Okay, I see what your point. Yeah, there's going to be novels and novels and novels of those.
Exactly.
But they are rooted in attachment in these ones. These are the fundamental ones.
Right.
So we can understand how they function.
Right.
And we can see logically that based on this culture, you're brought up to believe that you're supposed to have a partner and do this and dress this way and do that. They're all the extrapolations of understanding how attachment, and the deepest attachment. Okay, attachment is this first of all, it's multifaceted. The deepest level of it is like a dissatisfaction, a feeling I've never got enough, a feeling I'm missing something. So naturally it gives rise to the next level, which is hankering after something. And then then we start to search for the object. It's such that we think that when we get contact with it, it'll fill up the gaping hole. Right. All of this is a function of attachment. When it gets the object, then what it does is it exaggerates the deliciousness of the chocolate cake. And then you write all these stories about how the chocolate cake is the cause of your happiness. And then especially when it's the boyfriend, it's more complicated than that. And he's going to be the one who's going to make you happy for the rest of his life, which means you demand that he makes you happy every time, which means you're demanding that he satisfies your constant neediness, which then means you get angry when he does it, which means you get jealous when he does this and that, and all the other dramas that come from it. And then the other big lie we put on top of that, finally I found happiness, we'll say, and then we make it permanent. So that we layer all these lies onto it, all these conceptual stories we layer. So unpacking and unpacking these, and then we realize that's the grossest level. And then we realize the deepest level of attachment, since we're conceived, is the attachment to how we're seen, the craving to be seen as a good girl. This is the most primordial. They say the yogis in the mountains who've given up everything are still thinking about what the people in the village are thinking about them. This is the one that's completely pervasive. So pervasive we don't notice it until we start to shred away some of the other grosser levels of attachment. It's every single second in our mind because it's the closest to ego grasping, the closest to this wrong sense of a separate me. So the concept of attachment at this level is that I'm nothing unless someone else says I'm something. I'm nothing unless I've seen to be doing the right thing. I'm not valid unless someone says I'm a good person. That's why we get lonely. Loneliness, I've got all these thoughts, but they're valueless until you hear them. I mean, that's very schizophrenic, isn't it? What is it about my thoughts that are so hopeless until you hear them? And you might be as nutty as me. So two half people trying to boost each other up. Do you understand my point? So you might be even more needy and more neurotic than me, but when you say, oh, you're a nice person, Robina, I fall in love with you. I'm so blissed out, even though you're an idiot. It shows how demented we are. Do you see my point? I'm a half a person needing you to tell me I'm nice, and you're a half a person needing me to tell you we're mad. Crazy. This is the deepest attachment of all. So to become, we say these words in our culture, to become our own person is pretty intense. Really knowing how to verify who we are right in here without worrying what you think in this. And this is the one that drives every decision the world makes. That's what we mean by success. I mean, I always think even you're driving in the road and a car toots you. We'll have a panic attack, and we don't even know them. They're a stranger, and we're freaking out about what they don't like us. Right. We just take it for granted. In other words, this attachment is even more simple. It's the attachment to be liked. We've got to ask the question, why do we need to be liked? We've got to ask that question, but that's too shocking in our culture because that's the very meaning of becoming a socialized human being. This is the deepest attachment. Do you understand? So then once we get understand the function of attachment, then we can do all the unpacking of all the conceptual stories that come as a result of that. This is the root one. You hear my point? That's very fascinating. Do you understand?
Yeah. It's like, what do people like the Dalai Lama when they push aside so much attachment? It's like a part of me is like, what's there?
Well, that's it. What's there is very simple. There's no ego grasping, so there's no sense of a separate I, there's no fear, there's no neurosis, therefore there's no attachment, therefore there's no anger, therefore there's no jealousy or arrogance or pride or low self-esteem, but there is only kindness and connectedness and empathy and compassion and fun and joy and love and all the other qualities, because they're the ones that are at the core of our being. This other stuff, this mental illnesses stuff, is all just rubbish. And Buddha says we can get rid of it. What's left is goodness. What's left is wisdom and clarity and fearlessness. They're the real qualities. That's what we really are. And that's all he expresses every day. I mean, what he looks like a nice guy, you know, but that's what he's expressing. And one of the key things is all these delusions are rooted in fear. Fear is their flavor. And when they're gone, there is no fear. This is incomprehensible in our world. This is incomprehensible. To think you can literally know without fear. Do you understand? It's very fascinating. Way to go. What else, people? Anything else? Any other questions? So then how do you practice this day to day is the real point. How do you put it into practice, you know? Well, once you're conscious of it, even roughly, you're a little bit aware of your own delusions. You know you've got attachment and anger. You know you're always craving to get what you want every second. Well, then try it once a week. Forget once a day. Once a week. You know, someone jumps in front of you in the car. Just right there. Grab it. Opportunity. Okay, please. Go in front, you know, right there. That's practicing it. Being delighted that someone gave you the opportunity for you to see your attachment and your anger. That's what a transforming means. Just plain old kindness can be, go in front. But noticing it as an opportunity for you to catch your attachment when it rises, and then being delighted to use it to turn it around and call that good. Then the consequence will be you'll say, please go in front. So that's the attitude, to see it as good. Like when you're driving up, when you go to the gym and you feel the pain, you check the muscle, you know it's good because it's telling you the problem. That's the attitude. We get it, we understand it. It just doesn't come spontaneously, that's all. That's how you practice. Once every now and again. Don't get too brave, you know. Once every now and again. That's called transforming problems into happiness. And eventually you become like bodhisattvas for whom it's better to have bad things and good things happen. Okay, that sounds demented to us. It's better that they give than receive. They're the opposite of us, you know, because their minds are so courageous, so outrageous. But if we try to, it's important to understand the logic of it, not just some sentimental, gooey idea. It's good to have suffering. You get all weird if you think that. And by doing this every time, you're putting an atomic bomb under your attachment, you know, there's no question. Because you're reinterpreting what you think is good. That's why I always use that example of that woman on death row in Florida. She's the most perfect example of exactly this level of practice. In the 70s, hitching in Florida with a hippie husband, hippie kids, they get picked up by two guys. The guys get picked up by the cops. They kill the cops and blame the hippies. So they're on death row. 17 years she was in prison. She got out eventually. Proved to be innocent. The husband was executed even. I mean, you can't conceive of the nightmare. You just hear these words, you can't imagine the pain they must have been involved in. Look at the pain when someone says one word about something we didn't do, like panic attack for the rest of our life, you know. Someone will never get over it. Bitter, resentful, freaked out. Go kill people. But she was this astonishing person. I think she wasn't Buddhist. I think she did yoga or something, I forget. But just clearly had to have this extraordinarily courageous, intelligent mind. And she said, at some point I realized I couldn't change anything. But they couldn't take my mind from me. So I decided, I'm not a prisoner, I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell, I'm a cave. I mean, it's so mind-blowing, you can't even think about it. You can only imagine it. Think of our ordinary experiences of being offended, hurt, upset, insulted, not getting what we want, people leaving us, people criticizing us. Everybody on this planet has this. And look at the pain that it causes. And some of us we never get over it, you know. Can never forgive, never get over it. Even as children, it's so bitter and unbearable in our minds. That's why I have such admiration from any of my friends in prison who are practitioners, because they realize they can't get out of that cell. They can't change the situation. But they know they can change their mind. And what that means is, call it something different. That's it. It seems so shocking to hear it so simple. And all that does show is the depth of our belief in the truth of whatever arises in our mind. Chocolate cake is good. Trekking is bad. Do you understand my point? It is so real to us because it also it triggers those awful feelings. My lungs destroyed, you know, my muscles killing me. I'd look at the mountains and it would just look boring. So it's so easy to believe in that. It's almost impossible to think. It's just a simple example. Because everything in me, due to my programming, due to my habits, that was what I called an unpleasant experience, you know. We understand this. So to imagine your husband's executed, you're both innocent, kids are gone, on death row. I mean, normal people go mad. And I can tell you enough stories about people who go mad in prison. The nightmare of the suffering, you know. But she had this astonishing ability to see things differently. And guess who, and the point is here, why would you do this? Think about it. She was going to pass an exam somewhere. She was the beneficiary. She was happy. That's the point. Finally, Buddha's point is happiness comes from how we think. That's the point, how we interpret everything. This is exactly consistent with Buddha's view. But absolutely astonishing, you know. So we're the beneficiary. It's not some kind of torture you're supposed to kind of put upon yourself, you know, and then you pass an exam. No, it's for your benefit, baby. Okay, not to mention in the compassion wing, it's part of the method for you to cut delusion so you can be of benefit to others. But even thinking just in simple terms, who is the beneficiary of the person who, when they have a problem, try to see it as good? The person who has the problem. You change your view, so you stop having a problem. It's completely logical, but it takes time to hear it. And often we don't want to hear it because you say, well, what do you mean? If a person's just killed accused me of death row, what do you mean I should be happy? I'm allowed to be angry, we'll say. That's like the beginning stages before we even begin to practice. We're so caught up in believing that I'm a victim of everything What do you mean I should change my mind? Why should I? I'm not wrong. That's how we think. So you've got to go a long way to get to the point where you recognize it's your own mind and then recognize you can change your view of it if you want to. Pretty intense. It's got heavy duty. It's heavy duty practice. Don't just treat it lightly, you know. But powerful. So like I said, try it once a week. If you can. Just once a week will do. I think I'm running out of voice here, I'm sorry. 8:30. Any more questions, people? About anything in general that we haven't talked about yet, which we will over the weekend, of course. It is a pretty thermos, actually. I like the design. The shape, I find the shape pleasing. That's my eye, you see. I'm calling it the shape, and then I'm interpreting it as good design, you see. That's my call. Like the trek was ugly. This is pretty. You understand? Any other points to talk about before we finish tonight? We've got lots of more to talk about in the weekend. Huh? Nothing? Yes. Oh, okay, go on then. Well, we'll find out.
I'm in kindergarten here, so not even junior
you
school.
what, darling? You what?
I said I am in kindergarten.
Well, darling, it's all right. Go on. Go on.
Not even junior school.
Go on.
I just wonder if you get angry, and if and when you do, what do you do, and what is your mental process?
Well, I think it's easy just to talk about the mental process, which is the Buddha's teachings, which is the one I try to practice. As to how good I am at it, or maybe that's just, it's kind of maybe you do your best. So anger is an interpretation of something that sees it as ugly, isn't it? Sees it as bad. You agree? Because my attachment doesn't want something else. If we understand that analysis, that's what anger is, right? Now that's a shock to us because we just think anger, like if someone's mean to you, it's a right to be angry. You understand? It's right to stand up for your rights and be angry. But so anger then is an over-exaggeration of the ugliness of something. Would we agree with that? Would you agree with that? Attachment is an over-exaggeration of the goodness of something. So attachment to chocolate cake. I think of it, I want it, I imagine it, I've had it before, I know it triggers pleasure, I've got this story in my head about chocolate cake, haven't I? So then I manipulate to get it again, I order it, I expect it. And the shock is when carrot cake comes, isn't it? So it's all based on this story built up in my mind. Would you agree? That's how attachment works, but it's happening 1,000 times a day very subtly. But that's an obvious, simple example of it. It's this whole story built up in my mind. And then all the excitement and the anticipating that comes, because we know that when we have contact with it, it triggers some kind of pleasure, doesn't it? Do you agree? So then that story, the stronger that story is, the stronger the attachment, the stronger the expectation, the stronger the hunger, the more shock it is when you don't get it. And that's the beginning of anger. So a person who's got a very extreme attachment, and this can mean anything, it's not meant to be critical, it's just how we are, then when it doesn't get what it wants, then it can be devastating. Like, if I'm in love with Fred, completely, like Sean, I'm in love with Sean, we're going together for years, built up all this story, he's going to get married, we're going to have this, and the babies in our life, we've got our plan, the whole of our life planned out, and he doesn't turn up at the wedding, Do you understand? I mean, it's a dumb example, but it's it's obvious. The more you have that fantasy and expectation, the more the bubble bursts, the more shattered you are, and the more you go down. And that can be insanity for some people. Like when your baby dies. Now, this sounds too shocking to us as well. But if you're an ordinary human being with samsaric mind as well as virtuous mind, then you're going to have a close connection with your baby called love, incredible close connection, incredible love for that baby, incredible compassion for that baby, but also you're going to have attachment, which is all the fantasy part, the build-up, the story, the divine, the this, the that, and that's the part that gets shattered and destroyed when the baby dies. That's what, and that sounds very shocking to us because we just say, oh, it's natural. But the more powerful the expectation, the more powerful the story, the more powerful the build-up and the anticipation, the more devastated we are when it gets thwarted. And this is the suffering of day-to-day life, every second of the day. So anger is a volatile expression. But look at 100 times a day, we'll get irritated, won't we? Annoyed, frustrated. They're mild versions of anger. What do you think? What do you mean by irritation is when you didn't get what you wanted? The light wasn't green on time. The person didn't answer you properly. The noise wasn't so pleasant. The food didn't taste nice. The husband didn't listen to you in time. You got irritated, annoyed, upstraight, frustrated. These simple words, they're aversion, they're anger. But we never pay attention to them. I mean, I was going to say, you don't go to your therapist because you get annoyed. You go to a therapist, you want to kill your husband. So if anger's really strong, we think we've got a problem. But if we don't, this is not quite answering your problem now, but this is answering your point. If we're conscious of our mind every day, conscious of this neediness to always get what I want every second, it's so deep down, and in the millisecond it doesn't, catching it and arguing with it. It's okay, Robina. You don't have to get what you want every time. It's all right, sweetheart. Relax. Just that as a little, you just do a little bit of your inner therapy. Instead of building it up as frustration, which we don't deal with, and we have another frustration 10 minutes later, and then at 3 o'clock another one. By the end of the day, you're exhausted because we haven't dealt with, and most of our life, we never deal with anything until one day the straw that breaks the camel's back. So just ordinary daily practice for a Buddhist is learning, get some concentration, controlling your body and speech, don't vomit out every word you think, beginning to become conscious of what the hell is going on in your mind, and catching this constant process of expecting and then disappointed, expecting, getting irritated, expecting, getting angry, but each time it happens, you counteract it in your mind. Relax, Robina, it's okay. You get talk to the little child in here. But that's dealing with it. You just dealt with that particular problem. Then you're more equipped to deal with the next one. But we don't deal with them until eventually we go mad. This is really so practical. This is what daily practice is. Being your own therapist, as Lama Yeshe put it. It's so intelligent. It's something cosmic. Do you understand? But you've got to label the problem called attachment. And then label the problem called aversion. But they sound too cute in our culture. We all the time think, well, what happened to me in the past to cause me this way? That's not the issue. Buddha says, look at the past if you like. That's not the problem. We think it is in the West. The problem is what's arising in your mind. And that's what we have to catch. It's the most direct method. And owning that as mine. Do you understand? Well, you catch it every day, then how you practice getting better and better, and then eventually the serious things come, and you're equipped to deal with it because you've practiced. Practice is necessarily practical, internal, observing your mind. But this is the point about Buddhist psychology. We've got to label these states of mind in the way that Buddha's talking. We know about frustration. We might know about attachment, but don't call it that. But then we just call it normal, so we don't counteract it. And then we all the time think of what happened. And then, what's wrong, Robina? Oh, I'm so annoyed. Why? Well, Fred did that. So we focus on Fred, not the frustration. We always focus on the external thing, not on the thing in here. Buddha's thing is, look here. The thing might be a problem. Fred might have done that thing. That's not the issue. The issue is the frustration in your mind. That's the part that's powerful. And it's so simple, but it's kind of too shocking because we're so used to thinking it's Fred that did the problem. I'm allowed to be frustrated because Fred's wrong. And we justify all these states of mind. Buddha says it's okay, justify them, but you can change them, baby. It's the quickest method, you know. Do you understand? Okay. What else? Yeah.
By the
Hello.
way,
Happy to see you again.
Thank you. By the way, my name is Fred.
Brad. Who are you?
Fred.
Brad. Okay. Oh. Fred, you're Fred. Oh, God, he's my boyfriend. You're the trouble, Fred. Go on. Oh, maybe I'll use you. Thank you very much. Go on.
My question is not my question. My nephew asked me
Who?
again.
Who asked you?
My nephew.
Your nephew. Who is this secret nephew? Are you sure it's not Fred who wants to know? You're just blaming your nephew?
No, he asked me, Uncle, what the relation in between Buddhism and universe? So there is another planet we can rebirth, or only here?
Oh, I see. Well, the Buddha's view is that you must know, the Buddha's view is we have these there are billions and trillions of different living beings, and all due to our own past karmic actions, our past programming of our own minds, we are born in different environments and different situations. So some of us are called human, some are called animal. Some of us share the same planet, we can see that, but we have very different mental states and very different mental experiences on the basis of this. But there are many other levels of beings, not necessarily other planets that you can get on an aeroplane to, but almost you could argue, what's that term they use in science fiction? Different dimensions, dimensions. There's different levels of dimensions of reality, and Buddhism means that quite literally, and there are many other kinds of sentient beings. very blissful ones and very suffering ones. Not all human, not all animal. That's the Buddhist answer. Is that it? Is that the one? You tell your nephew? Okay, good. Who else, people? Come on. Yes. Yep.
Hello. The way that you were talking about the sort of working through school, right? The
Yeah,
different levels.
Yeah, that's right.
That makes a lot of sense
Good.
based on the things I've read and
Yes.
how, because compassion is that's
Yeah,
while it feels like, oh, that's the thing I need to do all the time.
sure.
Oh, well, it doesn't really feel like that's happening all the time.
Exactly, that's right.
So you put Vajrayana at the very end.
Yeah, I did, yes.
And I don't know a lot about Vajrayana.
Okay,
But what is it about that
I'll tell you.
thing that
Yeah.
makes it all the way out
Advanced,
at the
I'll
end?
tell you. Okay, let's use, given Buddha's view that in this mental consciousness of ours we have neurotic, delusional, ridiculous, over-the-top states of mind that are the cause of suffering, the main one of which effectively in day-to-day life is called attachment. Given that, and that our job is to get rid of these states of mind. He has found that that's possible. Buddha has found. Right. So now, the first level of practice, let's use the simple analogy of chocolate cake, the object of attachment. Given that my attachment is so berserk, out of control, that I can't handle the chocolate cake, so I've got to leave the chocolate cake there. The very first level is control your body and speech. That's junior school. That means control your body, control your speech. Don't say the words. Don't jump on too many girls. Maybe even cut out the chocolate cake because you can't handle it. You're out of control. It's very intelligent. I mean, nobody asks an alcoholic to give up attachment to alcohol while continuing to drink alcohol. That's demented. So you've got to leave the object alone. So then by harnessing your energy of your body and speech and not following attachment's cravings, you begin to calm down the attachment, don't you? You stop feeding the attachment. And that's the first, that's junior school, the essence of it, abide by the laws of karma. Now you go to high school and be your own therapist, do the job of really unpacking and unraveling your own mind, knowing Buddha's view intimately and how these different states of mind function, and also getting some concentration from, concentration meditation. And you really get this phenomenal control over your mind now, astonishing levels of incredible clarity, incredible wisdom, just by controlling your mind, by developing concentration. Now you can now easily say, because you know the mind so intimately and so well, you could have a piece of chocolate cake, even though you haven't given up attachment yet, but you're so under control, it won't make you berserk. You've got more awareness. You understand? It's logical. Now you can say you go to the compassion wing, and if you're really advanced now, the logic being you're moving at this pace, now you've really harnessed your body, speech, and mind. You've subdued your body, speech, and mind. You're an astonishing being with clarity and bliss from concentration. Now you're really qualified to really put others first, to have far more, and your compassion outweighs your attachment. You haven't got even rid of attachment yet because such control of it. You can even now eat chocolate cake happily for the sake of others without making you berserk. Now, Vajrayana is the most sophisticated level where the idea, based on renunciation and emptiness, as well as compassion, you can actually, you got such control over your body, speech, and mind, you so intimately are familiar with all these different states of mind to an incredible degree of brilliance that you can utilize, you can happily, consciously choose to eat chocolate cake. And because you're so under control, you can understanding that the nature of your subtle physical body and your subtle mind, you can actually consciously eat the chocolate cake in order to trigger the pleasure that is triggered upon contact with it, to utilize that pleasure to get rid of all the delusions. It's the most sophisticated level of psychology. Where they say in the level of Tantra, because you're so developed in renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness, you've got absolute control over everything, that these brilliant, as Lama Yeshe says, Tantra is very technical. These amazing Indians came up with this first, before the Buddha. Based on the subtle physiology and subtle psychology, the way we're constructed, that's just to say that the tantric model, the way we've got these 72,000 subtle channels, the wind energies that course through those channels that are related to the states of mind, this really sophisticated physiology, basically. Having intimate knowledge of that, as well as concentration, renunciation, emptiness, and bodhicitta, you can learn to generate in meditation incredible levels of bliss. Bliss is natural. Even when you've got concentration, your mind's naturally blissful. naturally blissful. But normally, you get any bliss at all, we go berserk. As Lama Yeshe says, we just go berserk. Even a cup of tea on your hot day, you're thirsty, your mind goes berserk because attachment is so demented. We've got such control over all these things now, and so understand it so sophisticatedly, you can energize the bliss that otherwise would make you berserk, but to use that bliss combined with concentration to get to a very subtle level of mind where you can now do the job very quickly of ridding the mind of all the delusions. It's very sophisticated and very technical, but it's based upon all these intense states of mind. Does that make sense?
Now hearing you say it that way, why jumping to that, doing that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Could be incredibly dangerous.
Absolutely dangerous. There's no question.
Because I think I've tripped myself.
Yes,
before
thinking
in
that's right.
Thinking I'm doing something like that.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
Really, I'm just like attached.
No, that's right, precisely. That's exactly right. And that's why, a book I've just finished, the editing of Lama Yeshe's, which is coming out in October, Mahamudra, a lovely commentary on Mahamudra. As you said, many people, because we mystify all this stuff, mystify meditation, and because the mind is so astonishing, that many people start to meditate, but he said end up in psychiatric hospitals instead, because we really have this bizarre idea of what meditation is and have no comprehension of even how to handle what is going on in this crazy mind of ours. Even just sitting for 5 minutes to be silent, we don't know what to do with what arises. It's too berserk. So it demands an incredible amount of hard work and a lot of good practice to really know what to do with the mind, It's not as easy as we think. And then Tantra is the most advanced, the most outrageous. And it is technical, it's highly technical, but it demands incredible renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. It's logical when we understand it. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. What else, people? What will that do for tonight? Where? Who? What? Judy, okay. Oh, no. Who's
Hi.
that? You go, Judy.
So when you talk about transforming anger and transforming things that trigger pleasant things, are you talking about neutralizing them or just simply realizing that it's a delusional
I understand. There's
manifestation?
different levels, Judy. So keep the mic. At the first level of practice, equanimity is used by Buddhism at junior school level. Junior school and high school, which is the wisdom wing, where you're controlling your body, speech, and mind, where you're playing safe and not killing and not lying and not stealing and not bad-mouthing and not jumping on too many boys and girls and not eating too much cake and really learning concentration and really learning your mind. This is all the first level of practice. Unbelievable. So at that level, you develop equanimity, but it's very specific. That equanimity is having a balanced mind, not an up and down like yo-yo, not berserk. You understand? That's the first control, the first level, where you just learn to try to be more equal in relation to things, not get too excited, not get too depressed. But this level we're talking here is much more dramatic, where you actually welcome the problem. You greet the problem with a happy mind, and you call it good, because you understand emptiness and you understand attachment, and it's much more dramatic level of practice. This other one's like playing safe. But it's necessary as a prerequisite to get to the level of really transforming. It's much more dramatic level. So you have to learn to do what you're capable of. So if our anger and attachment are still so strong, then the first level is what we try to do. It's too advanced to actually welcome a problem when you're going berserk. It's ridiculous. It's not appropriate. If you're in a relationship with somebody and they really make you crazy because you've got uncontrolled attachment and jealousy, it is insane to think you can transform it. That's asking too much of yourself. It's better to move away from the object, or at least equalize and don't vomit out your thoughts. But to say actually transform it and see it as good, that is necessarily more advanced. And if you can try it, then go for it. But if anger's so volatile, it's too hard to do that because it's such an old habit we haven't subdued yet. So we've got to be cautious. But my friends in prison don't have the luxury of leaving, so they jump in the deep end and they attempt to see it as good. But it's not easy. Are you following me?
Mm-hmm.
So we do what we're capable of. That's why it's so important to know what level we're at and what we're capable of. And the thing is, it's such a big problem for us, we've got to move ourselves from the problem. Otherwise, we will go mad. But if we can be brave enough to see our mind's role in it and change the way we interpret it, that's what transforming is. That's fantastic. Do you understand?
Yes.
Good. That'll do, won't it? 10 to 9. Hang your britches on the line. Don't you say those things? Was that the child? I learned that one, didn't I? I think it's enough tonight. And we'll carry on tomorrow. And if you're not coming back tomorrow, I'm sure there's plenty of food for thought tonight anyway. The entire path in summary. So we think how, if there's any useful information here tonight, any tools that we can take from this, how marvelous. That's the point. It's got to be practical. So all these seeds we've planted just by listening, nearly 2 hours of seeds, maybe nourish them with this moment forward, with our practice, with our effort, so they can ripen in the future in the development of our amazing potential for clarity and bliss and joy and less neurosis and less anger, less depression, more clarity, more fearlessness, more kindness. How marvelous. For our sake and the sake of others. I don't think I can sing tonight. My voice is gone, so that'll do for English. And may bodhicitta grow and grow in the hearts of all. So my advertisements, we should do the advertisements. Yeah, there's this, don't forget the gala coming up. I promise I won't be here, but I promise I'll buy a ticket. And I will do that. That's just to give you encouragement, just pay $150 for a ticket for the gala on, where's the date? Oh, there it is. Saturday, April, that's next week. Where's it going to be? Okay. The 4-point underneath Robert Thurman's so small I can't read it. But I can see Robert Thurman's name. Tibetan tea reception. Good. It's to raise money for the centre, is it? What's the goal? What's the goal? How much you want to raise? That means you need 100 people paying $150 each. Have you got the 150 bookings yet? 60. Good. Well, you're going to aim for 100, dear. Okay then. 150. If you can't come, give you $150 anyway. I'm giving mine. That's that advertisement. And then there's this advertisement. What? Oh, why silent? That's ridiculous. You should have a jolly, loud, outright, competitive auction. You make more money. Come on, Sean. You get far more money with a competitive auction. Silent, so boring. My next advertisement is a pilgrimage I lead every year since 2001 to India and Nepal. Like I said, before you die, you must come. It's very special, amazing experience. And the third is a CD I made called Devotion that raises money for my Bodhicitta Trust, and 30% goes to the shop. And it's a choir of Rabinas, basically, singing prayers. Okay, that's all. Good night and thank you. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow, or some of you not. Then I'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.